assault, whether it happens anywhere, and certainly the border, I think, is sick, and we should do everything we can to stop that behavior. I think a lot of things have been said at this hearing, and I hear all the time about migration, what immigrants are doing, why they're coming here, but I also want to clear some of the misinformation that we've already heard today, but also it's important to clear up the facts about some of the data that's being used that I believe is actually incorrect, and I think that the facts make it clear. I do want to start with this chart, and Mr. Isaacson, you presented some charts in your testimony. I want to use this one as well. So if we look at this chart, this is actually a chart that's often used by my Republican colleagues. Donald Trump uses this chart. It's pretty famous, and it shows the migration spike here over time. But the truth is that this chart is actually factually incorrect, and I think it's important to note and to point out how incorrect it actually is. First, it says that Trump left office in April 2020, right here, when migration was actually at its lowest point. We know that's actually not true. Can you actually tell us what happened in 2020 and why was there a huge decline at this point in the chart?
Sure. I mean, all of the world's borders closed everywhere in March of 2020.
Because of the COVID pandemic.
Exactly.
Right, except the Republicans who have used this chart over and over again, including in other committees, keep saying that's when Trump left office. Now, when did Trump actually leave office?
January of 2021.
That's right, and January of 2021 is actually right here. So I'll add an arrow to that.
Ooh, arrows.
So if you look at this chart, from here to here was all of during Donald Trump's presidency. So the increase in border crossings and the spike that you see beginning to happen actually happened when who was president?
That's right. Things are already going up, a lot of single adults, and then just after that, the world's borders really start opening.
That's right. And so obviously, the border crossings start increasing. Joe Biden then becomes president, and then something else happens that's missing in this chart. We had the bipartisan border deal. And then, as we know, border crossings actually begin to decrease. So I'm going to add actually where we are today. This is actually where we are today with these illegal border crossings. And so I think it's important that we actually stick to facts. This is incorrect. When Donald Trump actually left office, what was actually happening in 2020, and the addition to this chart, which is actually where border crossings are today, an issue solved by the Biden-Harris administration, just to be very, very clear. And Mr. Isaacson, I also want to note, then we've discussed contributions of migrants, contributions of crime, and I think it's important that we know, yes, Donald Trump killed the bipartisan Border Patrol deal. We know that. And there's also been attacks on immigrants that somehow there's some sort of crime wave that immigrants are causing. Right. I also want to use this chart. This chart, by the way, is compiled by data by the men and women in our local police departments across America. So police actually submit this information. Now, let me ask you, do you agree that the country's safer than it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Right, because this is actually our crime trends and actual homicide rates in the US, and this is where we actually are today. I do see a spike in crime, actually, in 2020, right over here. Who was president when that dramatic spike happened?
Donald Trump, but also COVID, yeah.
Right, but Donald Trump was president, exactly. And Donald Trump, actually, murder rates surged by 30% to the highest rate since the 90s, correct?
That's right.
Now, in 2021, when Joe Biden became president, violent crime rates have now begun to decrease. So I just want to point out also that when we talk about migrants, we're talking about what the impacts to national crime rate is, that crime has actually plummeted this year, and the Biden-Harris administration has actually made the country safer. And so we've invested in community policing, and again, they understand that immigrants can contribute to this country. But just to connect back to the border, do you see any correlation between the crime rate in this chart and trends in migration over the last decades?
No, I see no correlation at all.
Is it safe to say that migration does not bring crime to our country? Would you agree with that?
No, the studies I've seen show that the migrant population commits crime at a lower rate than the U.S.
And in fact, also, when you look at studies of migration, we know that migrants actually cause less crimes than natural-born citizens. That's also correct. Is that also true?
Yeah, I mean, of course, migrants do commit some crimes, but the rate is lower.
And if you commit a crime, you should be held accountable to that crime, of course, and we know that's also critically important. So I just want to thank you because I think facts matter. They're important. This is a nation of immigrants, and I think it's important to actually stick to the data and the facts. And with that, I yield back.